Thank you, Laura, for the introduction. So our first speaker tonight is going to be Eddy Morassutti. Eddy is the head of quality management at Nestle Canada, where he leads a group of quality professionals who maintain the strict quality standards at Nestle Canada. The product categories include confections, coffee and beverages, Nestle food service, ice creams, frozen meals and pizza, and infant nutrition health science products. Eddy has over 30 years experience working in the food industry in Canada. Some of the highlights include being part of the creation of the Global Food Safety Initiative standards and closely working with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency on the new Safe Foods for Canadians regulations and inspector training. Eddy graduated from the Nutrition Food Science Department at the University of Toronto in 1986. He lives in Markham and loves food. So without further ado, Eddy, take it away.
As Laura mentioned, I graduated in 1986 at the University of Toronto here. And then after graduation, I basically said, now what? What do I do? I've got a degree in nutrition and food science, and I need to find a job. I didn't necessarily want to continue in education. I wanted to right away get into working and get into the food business specifically. So I really had a lot of questions that I asked myself, and those included things such as, what do I truly love to do? And what can I bring to any job that I may or may find out there in the industry? Oops. Hello. There we go. So right away I thought, I need to get my foot in the door. I need to find out where I can find jobs. In 1986, the internet did not exist. So it wasn't as simple as just looking up in Google who are food manufacturers within the GTA. It was a little bit more challenging than that. So the first thing I started to do is just to decide to set some goals. What do I want to do? And some of the goals were, I want to start in the food industry, particularly in the manufacturing side of food. And I needed to explore other opportunities. What sort of training did I need? What sort of education did I need? I wanted to obviously advance in my career, so I needed to find some place that would have advancement where I could start somewhere at the bottom and work my way up. I needed to learn a lot. I was right out of school. I had no experience in the food industry whatsoever. Also, what type of company I wanted to work for. I had to ask myself that question because I could have easily started with a small company, worked my way through, a Canadian company, a multinational. Again, those are questions that I really had to ask myself. And then what problems did I care about that I would be able to solve? And a lot of that really came back to quality and food safety. And that's really what I wanted to focus on in my career. And then finally, what environment did I want to work in? Some summer jobs I had in the past included working in manufacturing, not necessarily food manufacturing, but a factory environment is where everything starts. And that's where I felt that, you know what, I really need to start working there. So, here we go. The journey began. As I said, in 1986, we did not have internet. So I needed to find food companies within the GTA. And where is a place where there's lots of food? That's a question. Grocery store, exactly. So I trundled off to my local Safeway with a pad of paper, and I literally went up and down every single aisle and looked for food company names, and some that had Toronto addresses. Yes, that's how crazy it was. I just wrote them all down, and I just went home, and I started spitting out resume after resume and after resume. And actually, very shortly afterwards, I did receive some phone calls. And one of the most intriguing was Sunpack Foods. Now, Sunpack Foods was, and still is, a manufacturer of juice products. And I thought that was interesting. It was a relatively small company to start with. It was a manufacturing site. It was located in around Weston and Finch at that time. So it was easy for me to get to. And I thought, all right, I went for the interview. And it was for a quality technician. Essentially, it was quality control at the time. It was being out on the production floor, learning how juices are made, testing for juices for the appropriate specifications to ensure not only that the quality was up to snuff, but also that the food safety was implemented at the time. Some of the things I had to learn, though, when I was there is thermal processing, a little bit more microbiology, more practical microbiology, not the stuff that we're learning in school, but actually sitting there and learning about incubations and plating and reading and understanding what organisms can and cannot grow. Also, when you get into thermal processing, you're looking at aseptic packaging and aseptic techniques. Things that I didn't really learn very much about in school, but I had a lot of practical knowledge when I got into the work world. In addition to that, there was education available for me through my company to learn more about it. So again, education never stops. As soon as I graduated, that's when the learning really started. I worked at Sunpack for a good year and a half, but it was difficult. A lot of shift work. Started at 7 in the morning, worked till 4 in the afternoon. Then after 2 weeks, I'd start at 4 in the afternoon and work till midnight. Another 2 weeks, I'd flip midnight to 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was quite challenging. But you know what? You rolled with the punches. You learned a lot of stuff. I had a lot of experience, particularly in the manufacturing of juices. At the time, if you recall, I sent out a whole bunch of resumes when I first started. A year and a half later, I got a phone call from a small frozen food manufacturer named Marsan Foods. They still exist today. You wouldn't know them because they don't really have their own label. I was quite intrigued because the owner of the company approached me and he asked me to just sit down with him and talk to him about what my vision was of quality for food. We had an unbelievably good connection. It was a family-run business. Again, a small company, probably had about less than 100 people on the floor, had 2 shifts, and all they did was frozen foods. The reason I thought it was an interesting opportunity was not only it was a different industry, different technology, they also did private label, meaning that they manufactured for Heinz, Weight Watchers, Marks & Spencer's, and Loblaws. And I thought, you know what, this is a great time for me to join because they were really just starting to grow quite significantly. I joined there as a quality control technician, but very soon afterwards, the quality manager was going to retire. So he took me under his wing and he taught me all about the food manufacturing side of things, of frozen foods. I learned a heck of a lot more about micro. HACCP, which is hazard analysis and critical control points. That was just starting at that time. That was around 1987, 86, 87, I guess it was. I learned a lot about CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. At the time, they still are, a plant that manufactures product with meat in it. So they had an in-house inspector. And once I joined, I got to know that inspector quite well, and he taught me so much. I mean, he was another guy who took me under his wing. I learned a lot, not just about the CFIA regulations, but what hygiene needs to be, what good manufacturing practices needs to be. It was really good to make that connection, and to this day, I would highly recommend that wherever you end up working, make as many connections as you can. I learned a lot about labeling, recipe formulation, and after the QA manager retired, I was promoted not only to the QA manager, but product development manager. So that recipe formulation side of things really taught me a lot. I would get up at 4 in the morning, get into the plant and work with the cooks right in the kitchen, and I'd learn all about every single thing they did. One thing I'd highly recommend you do, and again, whatever job you do, there is no job that's too small, because everybody's going to teach you something. I learned so much from the cooks who were in that kitchen, and to this day, I still take a lot of that stuff that I learned from them to the job that I have right now. Let's see, I learned about raw materials. I learned about how to handle complaints, not just from consumers, but also my customers, which would include things such as the Heinz's, the Weight Watchers, the Loblaws of the world. As I mentioned, we were private label, and they still are private label. They produce still for a lot of significant food manufacturing companies such as Walmart, Loblaws, Sobeys, Metro, etc. I met a lot of those people. I wasn't looking for work. I was doing a lot of really good work at Marsan, really building the quality standards for them, and they really appreciated that. At the time, Loblaws was just really starting up their President's Choice program, and they were working on some frozen foods. The head of quality there came in one day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, asked me to help him with a trial. And because I was the product development manager, I certainly helped. I went out there, I started working in the kitchen. I was able to use all the kettles, I was able to use all the equipment because I had learned that from the people who worked on the floor. he saw all of that, and then eventually he said, look, we're building our quality department for President's Choice. Would you like to just come and have a talk? I went, okay. Once again, I went over, I had a nice talk with someone whom I'm still very close with. He was a boss of mine at the time, and I'm still very close friends with him. And I took the job at Loblaws. It was, oh, let me flip the slide. So I took the job at Loblaws. I took a chance. It was completely different. It wasn't in food manufacturing. It was really a quality assurance specialist. What that meant was they were looking for someone who had a lot of good food manufacturing and food science background, who could go out to all their co-manufacturers, contract manufacturers, who would produce products from them. One of the first projects that I worked on was the decadent chocolate chip cookie. So it was spending a lot of time at Colonial Cookies and Kitchener, understanding how that was working and how the recipe formulation worked and how that was going. And I have to say that after 30 years, the decadent is still the #1 cookie at Loblaws. So I'm very proud of that. But I learned a lot about food manufacturing because that wasn't my only category. Not only did I have bakery, not only did I have frozen foods, I had sauces, I had pet food. I also had some non-food experience. I got to learn more about films, wraps, aluminum foil. Again, there was no challenge that I said no to. And one of the things I would, again, highly recommend is don't say no. Take a look at the potential opportunity and where that could lead. President's Choice, as you know, is probably still the #1 private label out there in Canada, and one of the top ones in the world, I'd have to say. It still does quite a lot of really good work. But at Loblaws, again, I learned more about CFIA. I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of Canadian Food Inspection Agency inspectors when there were issues, when there were complaints. I learned about recalls. I learned about how to trace product. I learned how to argue with the CFIA, which was also a skill which I take today, because you constantly need to argue with the CFIA because they need to understand food manufacturing a lot more. A lot of younger inspectors are coming into the world and they don't have the experience, and they need us. They need people who have that experience. And I spend a lot of time talking to CFIA, literally daily. But at Loblaws, I learned a lot about auditing and how to audit a manufacturing site, not only for food safety, but for quality and as well as health and safety. Again, I didn't say no to anything. I just kept learning more and more at Loblaws, where I was the only quality assurance specialist at the time. Then they hired another one, and then we hired more and more, and then they needed someone to run the department for them. That I was promoted to the director of quality assurance for Loblaws. An exciting job. I stayed there for 16 years. One of the most exciting places I could have worked at the time because of all the variety of food product that we had. I don't know if you remember David Nicol. He was the president of Loblaw Brands Limited, and I worked directly for him. He was a very difficult man, but a very brilliant man at the same time. If he asked you to do something, you just did it. And because he got you all excited about it. You didn't do it out of fear, you did it out of excitement because you knew something great was going to come from it. So the peanut Szechuan sauce, which is still out there, was another one of my projects. And I have to admit, I learned a lot about sauce making at that time. Spent a lot of time in the manufacturing site and ensuring that we could put safe product on the shelf. Because initially he just came back from China with an idea for a peanut sauce, and we just thought he was crazy until we tasted it. And then after we recovered, we decided to make this a safe product. That spent a lot of time. Yeah, that was not a fun time. But we learned a lot about good manufacturing practices at the time. After 16 years, Loblaws taught me a great deal. But the food industry was, I was tired. I had spent 16 years at Loblaws, several years at Marsan, and a couple years at Sunpack. It was time for me to just learn a little bit more. Now, at Loblaws, we were also developing what's called the EXACT program. EXACT was a health and beauty aids area. So it was really about health products, aspirins, getting into a little bit of pharma. When I was getting tired of it, I wasn't looking for work. I got a phone call from Estee Lauder, a cosmetics company, believe it or not. They came to me and asked me if I was interested in joining them as the director of quality for Estee Lauder Canada. And I said, I know nothing about cosmetics. And then when we talked a little longer, I thought, you know, if I don't take this opportunity, I'm going to kick myself. I'm tired of the food industry. I think I need a change. It was a great change. I learned, again, something more. I learned not just the cosmetic world, which is a bizarre and fun world, I have to tell you, but at the same time, I learned more about Health Canada and Health Canada regulations, because we had a lot of the Natural Health Product Directory was just forming at the time, and we had some NHP, natural health products, that we were developing, anything with any SPF factor. So we were working very closely with the Natural Health Products Directorate. At the time, though, Estee Lauder, as I said, was cosmetics, so I wasn't a great user of cosmetics, as you can tell. But at the same time, they taught me a lot about people and people management. They're probably, and all the jobs that I've had, is probably the only place where I heard people are our greatest asset, and they truly meant it. It didn't matter if you were the general manager of a manufacturing site or someone who just walked around the floor cleaning up. They treated everyone with the utmost respect, and I thought that was something I could learn. Not only that, I learned a lot about how to develop other people and how to coach other people. We sat a lot with the department that I had. I had 15 people, 2 labs, microchemistry, and people who were quality technicians on the floor. And I learned how to manage people. It was something that I will always take with me and still do today, because I have a department of 10 now. But how to allow them to grow, how to allow them to make the mistakes, learn from those mistakes, guide them and lead them, but not tell them what to do. And that was a huge learning for me. I stayed at Estee Lauder for 4 or 5 years, I guess it was. Cosmetics was not my thing. I found that it was easy. Because the people were so good and the people were treated so well. I have to admit, anytime I wanted to implement a new quality standard or a new quality process, bingo, it was in. I didn't have to fight with anyone. It was actually, you know, now I look back and I wish I could stay, but at the same time, it was not challenging for me. It was just way too easy. And I thought, you know what, I miss food. I have to admit, I missed food. Going back to what I said before, know what you love. And I love working with food, whether it's cooking, whether it's manufacturing it, whether it's making sure that it's safe for consumers to eat and it's on the shelf. I missed it. So I just made a few phone calls and I said, look, I'm on the market. I'm looking for somebody to hire me. It didn't take long. It was like literally 2 weeks after making phone calls, I got a call from Sobeys. And they were looking for a director of quality assurance for their private label program, our compliments, selections, and all that. So I said, okay, let's do this. And it was a great opportunity. Once again, it was private label, it was manufacturing, it was working with a group of 10 quality people, as well as another 10 product developers. The interesting piece about that was I got to be challenged. They had not really strong quality programs in place when I started there. So it was to try and turn it all around. It was quite a challenge. Loved it. Rolled up my sleeves, got my team together, and I was able to put out some really good products at the time. Sobeys was going through a lot of changes after the 5 years, I think it was, I was there. And it was still very challenging, still having a good time, had a great team, working with amazing people. When I got a phone call from Nestle Canada and saying, look, we're looking for someone to head up our quality group in Canada. Would you like to join? I went, no, thanks. That was it. Went back to work at Sobeys, challenged again, keep working away. A month later, they call me again saying, look, could you come talk to us at least? And I went, okay, I'll come talk to you. So I thought, this is a global company, but they're calling me, you know, poor private label quality guy. What do they need from me? They needed someone with experience, and that was really what it was. They needed someone who had a broad experience in all food categories, and all the food categories that Nestle makes, I've touched in my 20 plus years of working. And so they said, look, this is what we need. We need somebody with your experience because we're just trying to pull it all together for Nestle Canada. We're relying way too much on the US. The US was really the quality group, and they had no one in Canada. So they felt very orphaned. And they needed someone who could speak to CFIA. They needed someone who could speak to Health Canada, someone who could speak to the businesses and help them achieve what they were looking to do. So I said, if I don't take this, I'm going to kick myself again. So I said, let me go for it. I've been at Nestle now for 10 years. I was the quality department for Nestle Canada for the first year, and now I've built a team of 10. We have, as Laura mentioned, our categories cover ice cream, frozen foods, pizza, confections, food service, so hotel, hospitals, infant nutrition. Gosh, what else do we do? Far too much. And I've learned a heck of a lot there. But I have been able to bring all the skills that I learned at Sunpack, Marsan, Loblaws, Estee Lauder, and Sobeys to Nestle. And it's been a fascinating ride. Again, I've been there 10 years, and I'm not going anywhere. They've got a lot of challenges. It's a huge multinational company. I've had a lot of opportunities. They've sent me to Switzerland several times. I've had some great trips to the UK. And there's more travel, I imagine, coming up. But at the same time, as you do that, you get to network further. You're meeting more people, not just within the Nestle world. I'm meeting people from all over the world in every single food manufacturer in the world, essentially. I belong to a lot of associations within Canada, Import-Export Canada, FCPC, which is Food and Consumer Products of Canada Association. Great organization. You get to meet most of the major players in Canada in the food industry. And again, I wouldn't give that up for the world. One of the things that I want to just assure you is anytime you're starting out is to ensure that you set those goals, network like crazy. One of the first days I was at Nestle, the head of technical and production for the world came in, and he just happened to say, oh, can I sit down with you? I'm like, okay. And he said, the best advice I can give you is just meet everybody. Just talk to people, get to know them, let them get to know you, and you can talk to them. You can ask them questions, they'll ask you questions, and you'll develop a network which will be far-reaching, beyond the four walls that you work in. Explore, be curious, don't be afraid. Ask a lot of questions, and you will be asked a lot of questions. You will not have all the answers. I still don't have all the answers. But I work with some great people, and I hope you get to do so as well. One of the biggest lessons I learned when I was at Marsan Foods as well was being humble. You will never get anywhere if you keep pounding your chest. It's okay to start at the bottom every single time, and that's what I did. And I would highly recommend, don't be afraid to roll up the sleeves and get dirty, because it's the best way to learn. So that's it. Thank you very much, guys.